Good morning. This is Today in Parliament. I'm Julian Reed. Members of Parliament meet in another of the sitting of the House of Assembly in just a few minutes. The last time they met was August 5th, when the Minimum Wage Amendment Bill was passed. Now, on August 15th, that raised the country's minimum wage to $210 weekly. Well, today, there are 5 bills on the agenda for House members to debate. And they are the Patents Application Bill, the Copyright Amendment Bill, the Trademarks Bill, the False Trade Description Bill, and the Protection of New Variations of Plants Bill. So now we'll go live to the House of Assembly where the proceedings are underway, and we'll be back at the lunch break to give you a wrap-up.
Which encourages us to know that when there's struggle in the land among the nations, and we turn to God, He hears our prayers and He answers. I read one verse then from Daniel chapter 10. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, and behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left alone there with the kings of Persia. And after negotiation for 21 days, God won as usual. The prophet got his request. Jerusalem was rebuilt. Those who wanted to go back after the captivity went back after the captivity, and God's name was glorified. There's always a little ray of hope, no matter how tense the situation can be. And God is faithful. Let us pray to Him this morning. Our Father and our God, we are grateful for Thy mercies which are new every morning. And we thank You for this new month, that these Your servants can begin their session as we continue the business of our Commonwealth. For protecting us from the ravages of Erica and Fred and any others out there, we thank You. And we ask for Your mercies, O Lord, to be extended to those who have been in the path of the storm. But bless us as a people, as a country, that we will be truly grateful for Your goodness, for Your loving kindness and all Your provisions. Bless these dear leaders of our land as they now resume their work this morning. Remember the teachers and educators, and remember those involved in building this nation, those involved in protecting our people. Grant them, O Lord, Your continual mercies today. Now bless this honorable House. Our dear Speaker, as he directs the affairs of today's agenda, our Prime Minister and his cabinet, the leader of the opposition and his associates, and all those involved in truly making this a happy little place on earth. Forgive us our sins. Cover us with the blood of Jesus, and in His name, grant us the peace, grant us the understanding, and grant us the blessing that we stand so much in need of today. And we will be mindful to give You all the praise, since we offer it all with thanksgiving. In the name of Jesus, who taught us when we pray to say together, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be Thy name, Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For Thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Amen.
Good morning, honorable members. Welcome back from our brief respite, referred to as summer break or recess. Today is Wednesday, September 2nd, 2015. Welcome each and every one of you. As we seek to continue to do the people's work, we thank our chaplain, always Pastor Roach, for his sage advice and prayers. Today we will follow the usual agenda, and our intent, among other things, is to debate a series of bills as it relates to copyrights and other matters. But before we do, just by way of announcement, I'd like to extend apologies on behalf of the member for Bamboo Town, who is on a family vacation, and apologies for the member for Nassau Village, who's a bit under the weather today. Now to the business at hand. Communication, introduction, and swearing of new members, laying of documents by ministers. Laying of documents by ministers. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Golden Gates.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following. The Bridge Authority audited financial statements for the 30th of December 2013.
Thank you, honorable member. Order that the documents be brought up. And order that the documents do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. Chair recognizes honorable member for Golden Gates.
Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following. The National Insurance Board of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas 2014 Annual Report.
Thank you, honorable member. Order that the report be brought up. And order that the audited report do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. Chair recognizes honorable member for Golden Gates.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following. The Price Control General Amendment Number 3, Regulations 2015.
Thank you. Order that the document be brought up. In order that the documents do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. Chair recognizes honorable member for Yamakro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the Child Protection Amendment Act 2014, Appointed Day Notice 2014. And Mr. Speaker, this document will have the effect of bringing into force the provisions for Marco's Law.
Thank you, honorable member. Order that the documents be brought up. In order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. Chair recognizes honorable member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House the Airport Authority consolidated financial statements for the year ended 30th of June 2014, an independent auditor's report, and the Nassau Airport Development Company Limited financial statements for the year ended 30th of June 2014, independent auditor's report.
Thank you, honorable member. Order that the report be brought up. Order that the reports do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. Chair recognizes the honourable member for Sea Breeze.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the Industries Encouragement Approved Product Wardrobe Express Limited Order 2015 and the Industries Encouragement Approved Manufacturer Wardrobe Express Limited Order 2015.
Thank you, honourable member. Order that the document be brought up. In order that the documents do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers. Chair recognizes honourable member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini.
Wish to lay on the table, Mr. Speaker, the IAAF World Relays Bahamas 2014 final report and the Junkanoo Corporation New Providence Limited audited financial statements for 31st of March 2014.
Thank you, honourable member. Order that the documents be brought up. Order that the documents do lie on the table. Further laying of documents by ministers? There are none. Thank you, honourable member. Statements and communication by ministers. Chair recognizes the right honourable member for Centerville.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make a communication on the Bahamas credit ratings and the economic and fiscal outlook, September 2nd, 2015. Mr. Speaker, honourable members will have seen that in the last week, two of the major international credit rating agencies released updates on their assessments of the credit rating of the Bahamas. I want to take this opportunity to provide honourable members and the Bahamian public with additional, more detailed information on these two rating actions. In doing so, I will present these ratings in their proper context in relation to the economic and fiscal policy framework that the government is pursuing. That, in turn, will permit me to explain why the government remains justifiably confident in our growth and employment prospects going forward. To summarize the rating reports, Standard & Poor's, S&P, announced on the 25th of August that it was lowering the credit rating by one notch, though it still remains at investment grade. Lowering by one notch, but still remaining at investment grade. The outlook for the rating remains negative. Mr. Speaker, for its part, Moody's announced on August 31st that it was upholding the country's investment-grade credit rating and maintaining a stable ratings outlook. One of the essential fundamental differences in these assessments relates to each agency's views on prospects for the Bahama project and its implications for economic growth and fiscal prospects. While S&P does place some emphasis on longer-term economic vulnerabilities, their main focus is on the short-term impact of the Bahama delay. Indeed, they hold the rather pessimistic pessimistic view that the project will not be completed quickly, and that once completed, its performance will be hindered for some time. Mr. Speaker, let there be no doubt either in this honorable House or among the Bahamian public that the government is firmly committed to a timely resolution of the Bahama matter and the completion of the project in a manner, Mr. Speaker, that will serve the best interests of the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Despite that, Mr. Speaker, despite that, S&P takes a dim view of prospects for the project and suggests that, as a result, real GDP per capita in the Bahamas will barely grow at all over the next several years. Mr. Speaker, such a downbeat assessment simply does not match up to reality. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, it also flies in the face of some of the evidence that S&P itself presents in their report. It is widely acknowledged that a prime prerequisite for a solid credit rating, strong investor confidence, and buoyant economic growth is a sound and sustainable public finance framework. Mr. Speaker, the government has been working diligently over the past 3 years.
Members.
It really flies in the face of tradition, Mr. Speaker.
It certainly does, right on, member.
Which is not intended to be controversial. Mr. Speaker, the government has been working diligently over the past 3 years to effect critical reforms to the major components of the fiscal accounts on both the expenditure and revenue sides. To that end, we have been pursuing a detailed and transparent medium-term fiscal consolidation plan designed to gradually reduce and eliminate the deficit and return the debt to GDP ratio to lower, more desirable levels. Mr. Speaker, that plan is working. The figures do not lie, and we are seeing very concrete fiscal progress. Mr. Speaker, our fiscal progress is indeed prominently acknowledged by S&P in its own report. They state, and I quote, "The government has made progress improving the country's fiscal deficits. Particularly through the introduction of the value-added tax. We believe that this, along with formalization spillovers from the modernized tax systems, will contribute to deceleration in the increase of government debt. This progress has contributed to our decision to keep the rating of the Bahamas in the investment grade category," end quote. Mr. Speaker, the government is fully cognizant of the structural rigidities or long-term economic vulnerabilities in the S&P terminology that must be addressed in this country if we are to achieve the much-needed strengthening of economic growth that is required not only to absorb the healthy growth of our labor force, but also significantly reduce our national rate of employment. Indeed, we spoke at length to those various rigidities and the policies that their amelioration necessitates in our Charter for Governance. The in-depth exercise that has been underway since last year on the elaboration of a national development plan for the Bahamas seeks to address the weaknesses that have been identified and present an action plan for more buoyant and sustained growth of our economy and employment opportunities. It is most unfortunate in our view that S&P failed to fully and properly account for the government's proactive and dynamic growth agenda in its analysis to the same extent, Mr. Speaker, that it acknowledged the success of our fiscal plan. I dare say that if it had, its conclusions would have justifiably been more positive. In this context, I would note that following the S&P report, CIBC World Markets put out its own assessment of economic and fiscal prospects in the Bahamas, in which it concluded, Mr. Speaker, that our economic recovery continues and will be buttressed by the ongoing strong recovery in the United States of America. Mr. Speaker, CIBC World Markets also concluded that the pace of tourism activity has picked up and should continue to grow. They cite the decline in the national rate of unemployment to 12% in May of 2015, and the fact that youth unemployment, while still high, has nonetheless fallen from 31% to 25.3%. CIBC goes on to assert that we have succeeded, Mr. Speaker, CIBC, and there are members here who know CIBC, they goes on to assert that we have succeeded both in bolstering revenues with VAT introduction and keeping the growth and expenditure low. These developments, they claim, underlie their so-called bullish view, not my words, CIBC, their so-called bullish views about our prospects. In their own words, and I quote, "The Bahamas appears to be moving in the right direction," end quote. The Moody's assessment, Mr. Speaker, also takes a somewhat more positive view of our economic and fiscal prospects. They also cite the important progress that we have made in terms of fiscal consolidation, underpinned by successful VAT implementation, and assert that this will contribute to the stabilization of the debt ratio, which, having peaked in 2014, is poised to decline steadily going forward. As for the economy, Mr. Speaker, Moody notes that as tourism performance has improved, our economy has shown definite signs of recovery. They assert that going forward, they expect the economy to post higher growth rates than in recent years on the basis of yet stronger tourism flows and continued foreign investment into the tourism sector. While they see the Bahama delay as leading to a postponement of its economic impact, they go on to forecast that real economic growth of over 2% and up to 2.5% per year can be expected in the 2 years following its opening. Building, Mr. Speaker, on their more upbeat assessment, they further state that despite the difficulties in respect of Bahama, they believe that the Bahamas remains an attractive destination for investors. They certify that. Not the opposition, they certify that. In their estimation, Mr. Speaker, in their estimation, the Bahamas government scores their words, and I quote, very high, end quote, rating in terms of institutional strength as we score favorably on the World Bank's governance indicators. According to these indicators of the World Bank, we have a strong track record in respect of policy predictability, transparency, and sound macroeconomic policy. Again, Mr. Speaker, these are important factors in enhancing investor confidence as our economic growth prospects. The Moody's report, Mr. Speaker, goes on to favorably review our fiscal policies, stating that the introduction of a medium-term fiscal consolidation plan has presented clear guidance on the policy framework that the government is pursuing to improve the public finances. Mr. Speaker, I have taken the time today to review these recent reports from the rating agencies because I believe it is important to clearly spell out all of the relevant facts about the economic and fiscal prospects for our country. Mr. Speaker, it is for me to proclaim that notwithstanding what is being said, the government has a clear vision of the policy framework that is required to both redress the public finances and bolster growth and employment. We are actively and doggedly pursuing the various multifaceted policies that comprise that framework. And it is for me to conclude, Mr. Speaker, that I am confident that we are on the cusp of a stronger, more prosperous, and more modern Bahamas for all Bahamians. Thank you.
Thank you, Right Honourable Member. Member. Order that the communication be brought up. Order that the communication do lie on the table. Further statements and communication by ministers. Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Bain and Grandstown.
Excuse me.
Member for Long Island.
Just bend down. I was just...
Somebody gets locked. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of National Security's main responsibility is to contribute toward creating a safe and secure Bahamas by the effective enforcement of law and order, the maintenance of secure borders to protect the country against internal and external threats, and the punishment and rehabilitation of offenders. It is a very serious and onerous responsibility to which I am fully dedicated, and, Mr. Speaker, I invite all Bahamians and residents to unite in building a safer Bahamas. During my tenure as National Security Minister, the Ministry and its various agencies have been actively tackling the unacceptable level of crime. During a recent address to the nation, I carefully detailed the challenges as well as successful accomplishments. But there are a few points, key points, that I wish to highlight as I table the address, the national address, in the Honorable House of Assembly. Mr. Speaker, in order to make the Bahamas safer, we must get a good grasp on the parameters of the crime problem. Our nation faces three main thematic pillars that are at the core of the crime issue, namely illegal drugs, illegal guns, and at-risk youth who become gang members. Local law enforcement agencies, in cooperation with their international drug counterparts, continue to produce tangible results in their interdiction efforts by seizing cocaine, marijuana, and other illicit drugs. Since last October, the United States Bahamas Security Corporation has resulted in the seizure of some 33 kilograms of cocaine, 86,000 pounds of marijuana, and more than 10,890 marijuana plants. The United States, the Bahamas, and Turks and Caicos Island authorities have, for the last several decades, cooperated in a drug interdiction program called OPBAT, which is recognized as the most effective initiative of its kind globally. Last year, the Royal Bahamas Police Force and the Royal Bahamas Defense Force received an award from the United States in recognition of the significant contributions they have made through the OPBAT program in the continuing effort to counter the increasing international threat posed by the trafficking of narcotics and other illicit substances.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, between the years 2005 and 2014, police seized a total of 3,328 firearms off the streets. For this year alone, the police have already confiscated 262 guns and 5,276 rounds of ammunition.
Acceleration.
U.S. Bahamas Security Cooperation has led to the seizure at Bahamian ports of entry of more than 20 illegal firearms and 3,000 rounds of ammunition. One of these joint operations resulted in the arrest earlier this month of 2 U.S. citizens in Florida for firearms smuggling to the Bahamas. Our local firearms tracing and investigations unit has been upgraded with a full complement of highly trained and experienced investigators. The unit has been outfitted with the latest technological advancements in tracing and identification software. During the course of this week, representatives of the United Nations Regional Center for Peace, Disarmament, and Development in Latin America and the Caribbean, with the support of the government of the United States, are facilitating a 3-day workshop on operational forensic ballistics training for law enforcement officers that is intended to enhance and improve their ability to conduct investigations into firearms trafficking. The workshop will provide a broad overview of the importance of operational forensic ballistics in investigating, analyzing, and prosecuting crimes involving firearms. Mr. Speaker, officials throughout our national security agencies have been specially selected and trained, both locally and overseas, to dismantle local criminal gangs. An anti-gang unit has been established, which is currently attached to the Firearms Tracing and Investigation Unit, and they have begun their work arresting gang members for their engagement in illicit activities. Members will be aware, Mr. Speaker, that last year in Parliament we enacted an amendment to the Penal Code with the intent to eradicate gangs. Membership in an illegal gang is now a major criminal offense, punishable on conviction to a fine of $500,000, that's $500,000, and to imprisonment for 20 years. Not all, and to imprisonment for 20 years. The Act also makes it a crime for any person who has in their possession a bulletproof vest in association with an unlawful gang, liable on conviction to a fine of $100,000 and imprisonment for 20 years. The amendment further makes it an offense for members of an unlawful gang to commit crimes involving guns and/or drugs, the penalty for which is $500,000 and 20 years in prison. Mr. Speaker, this is an essential part of our fight against the formation of gangs and the gang activity that leads to so much of the violent crimes confronting us in our country. Mr. Speaker, in 2012, my ministry reinstituted the heads of National Law Enforcement Agency to oversee the coordination and synchronization of efforts of the various law enforcement agencies in our unyielding resolve to defeat crime. HONLIA consists of the Commissioner of Police, Commander of the Defense Force, Controller of Customs, Director of Immigration, the Commissioner of Corrections, and the Director of the National Intelligence Agency, who meet regularly to plan and discuss strategies for securing the peace and safety of our citizens and of our country. Since coming to office, Mr. Speaker, a total of 342 police officers, 353 Defense Force Marines, and 175 correctional officers have been recruited. In the next entries this year, there will be a total of just over 100 police officers, 160 Defense Force Marines, and between 100 and 120 correctional officers will be recruited. Mr. Speaker, members are familiar with the fact that the government has approved a $232 million loan for the acquisition of state-of-the-art patrol craft and the modernization of bases and port facilities at Coral Harbor and in the central and southern Bahamas at Gunpoint, Ragged Island, and Mathitan, Inagua, respectively. To date, the Defense Force has acquired 5 of the 9 patrol craft, which are beginning to make their presence felt throughout the archipelago. As a result of suggestions, Mr. Speaker, from members of the public at our crime forum, the Defense Force has set up an outpost at the South Beach pools, and as a result of this, the entry into the Bahamas of illegal vessels bringing illegal immigrants has been brought almost to a complete halt. I know about it. In May of this year, the largest number of Marine recruits in the history of the Defense Force, Mr. Speaker, graduated from new entry training. The Department of Correctional Services has been undergoing a transformation, Mr. Speaker, from a largely punitive institute to a rehabilitative institution. The Department of Correctional Services has recently been awarded a grant in the amount of $350,000 from the Inter-American Development Bank to design a new parole program geared toward facilitating the successful reintegration of nonviolent offenders into society. The specific objective of this system is to reduce recidivism. That is, to stop persons who have been to prison from re-entering prison. It will also give recently released inmates an opportunity to return to society and live a productive and crime-free life. Mr. Speaker, we have been vigorous in our efforts to prevent and detect offenses of trafficking in persons, usually described as the crime of modern-day slavery. For its efforts, the United States Department of State ranked the Bahamas for the first time as a Tier 1 country, which means that the government of the Bahamas fully complies with the minimum standards for the elimination of trafficking. The government successfully convicted 1 trafficker and sentenced 2 traffickers from previous convictions last year. Initiated 3 new prosecutions, adopted a 4-year national anti-trafficking strategy and action plan, provided anti-trafficking training to officials, and continued to implement a victim-centered assistance protocol for identified trafficking victims. Mr. Speaker, this trafficking in persons, when I came to this position, I was told we didn't have trafficking in persons in the Bahamas. But we have had a rude awakening since then, Mr. Speaker. And these persons are usually exploited sexually through prostitution and other similar activities, or in their labor through the working conditions. We are resolute that we will do everything in our power to ensure that this does not take stronger hold in our country. The government successfully convicted one trafficker, as I said, and continues to implement a victim-centered assistance protocol for identifying trafficking victims. Mr. Speaker, I spoke recently about the $20 million grant or loan from the Inter-American Development Bank. This is to be expended in a new citizen security and justice program. There are 4 key objectives of this program. Firstly, to improving nonviolent behaviors. Secondly, increasing employability and employment of at-risk youths. Thirdly, strengthening institutional capabilities of the justice services. And finally, reducing the recidivism rate, which involves the rehabilitation and reintegration of offenders so that upon their release from prison, they are equipped to lead crime-free lives. Mr. Speaker, in order for us to carry out those objectives, we will be inviting institutions, public institutions that are involved in dealing with criminal justice matters to make submissions so that programs that they have that are thought to be successful may be expanded and extended. The ministry and its agencies will be developing new programs, and we will make use of programs that have been tried elsewhere and have been found to be successful, particularly in our region, because it is extremely important for us to get to the bottom of the core issues, Mr. Speaker, that generate crime in our country. Mr. Speaker, we have indicated that we are working on what is called the Parental Responsibility Act. We responded to a call made during one of our crime fora that we legislate responsibility for parents for their children via such an act. The primary objectives of this bill, when legislated, would be to compel parents to properly supervise their minor children at all times and to accept responsibility for their actions. This proposed act, Mr. Speaker, is somewhat different from the Child Protection Act of 2007, which focuses on core principles in relation to child protection, including the welfare and best interests of the child. Last year, the Ministry of National Security launched a youth initiative dubbed Shock Treatment, a program which was developed to help young Bahamians who have strayed down the wrong path to become more sensitized to the consequences of their deviant behavior. What has impressed us, Mr. Speaker, is how important the program has become as a means of identifying problems that young people have and finding ways to deal with them. The young people who are engaged in the program have usually been recommended by their parents or by their schools. And, Mr. Speaker, there is great demand there's great demand for that program to be used on our young people. Last year, my ministry launched the Give Every Child a Father program. And, Mr. Speaker, while the name may sound something that cannot be achieved, one of the bigger problems that we have in our country is the fractured families, Mr. Speaker. There are fewer single-parent families in our country than there are what we would regard as normal families. 70% of the children that are born in our institutions are born out of wedlock, Mr. Speaker, and in programs that we have conducted, particularly in the inner city communities, the level of single-parent households which are touched by criminal activity of children is extremely high. And so our objective is to find increasing numbers of honest, God-fearing men who would volunteer to take under their limb some young man and try to teach him through their own experiences what it takes to become an honest skilled man. It has been extremely difficult for us to get the numbers of volunteers that we need. But, Mr. Speaker, we are working on it very resolutely. Mr. Speaker, when I was coming in this morning, there was a demonstration outside by primarily women who are asking that we introduce Marco's Law. Marco's Law, you will recall, is an amendment to the Child Protection Act, which sets out penalties for violent crimes against children, Mr. Speaker. And I wish to bring, well, the member for Yamacraw this morning tabled communication indicating that the law has been enacted. But what I would like to say is that the protocols that come along with the law, which relate to what the public response is from the Royal Bahamas Police Force and other agencies as to how to respond in the case of a missing child. The protocol has been used in 2 cases so far, Mr. Speaker, and led to the quick rediscovery of children who were thought to be lost. And so this legislation, Mr. Speaker, has created a nationwide alert system for missing children. The second part of that, Mr. Speaker, is completing the regulations associated with the amendment to the Sexual Offenders Act, which puts in place the sexual offenses register. And it is my intention that we should have that available in the not too distant future. Speaker, I'd like to thank the staff of the Ministry of National Security and all the law enforcement agencies, including the Police Force, the Defense Force, the Department of Corrections, Departments of Customs and Immigration, as well as the general public, for their cooperation, collaboration, and support. Because together, we can be successful in bringing crime to a controllable level, but we have to be working together. The best approach to the crime problem, Mr. Speaker, is a multidisciplinary one that takes into account interrelated issues, including economic, social, cultural development, social justice, and inequalities in the society and in the country. We have taken significant steps on the long road towards halting and reversing crime, criminality, and the fear of crime in our Bahamas. What is needed now, Mr. Speaker, is for each and every Bahamian to take ownership of this issue and work together in bringing peace and stability to our country. So, Mr. Speaker, I wish to call upon the Honorable House to join in the movement to bring peace, safety, and stability to our community and society. And I particularly wish to call on the members of Parliament, Mr. Speaker, to join with us in the Ministry of National Security to work targeted programs in each of our constituencies in an attempt, Mr. Speaker, to reach and communicate with young people of all ages throughout our constituencies. We are developing, or we have developed a protocol, and it is my hope that I would have an opportunity soon to speak with members of Parliament individually and see if we can recruit them in this very important challenge. I also call upon members of the House to support our security forces, to encourage our constituents to cooperate with the police and other law enforcement officers, and to be a part of the change that we all wish to experience. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the nation may be assured that the government will not rest until the nation has been rescued from the oppression of organized crime and violence. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Table a copy of the address which I made last week, along with the communication.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order that the communication and the address be brought up. Order that both documents do lie on the table. Further statements and communication by ministers. Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Yamacraw.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make a communication on the introduction of the prepaid Visa card for the government's food assistance program, which is operated by the Department of Social Services of the Ministry of Social Services and Community Development. Mr. Speaker, in November 2014, history was made when the reloadable prepaid Visa card was introduced for beneficiaries of the food assistance program at the Wolf Road Center. In so doing, the Bahamas joined many other countries around the world in the use of electronics for the delivery of assistance. The new method was subsequently introduced to the 3 other community support outreach centers in New Providence as follows: Fox Hill Center, January 2015, Robinson Road Center, March 2015, Horseshoe Drive, May 2015. The card was introduced in Grand Bahama on Monday, July 27th, 2015. And as of Friday, July 31st, 2015, a total of 6,232 beneficiaries was receiving food assistance by way of the prepaid card. This figure includes 5,254 beneficiaries in New Providence and 978 in Grand Bahama, 848 of whom are clients of the 8 Mile Rock office, and 130 are clients of the Freeport office. And Mr. Speaker, I must add that the reassessments have been completed in Freeport proper as well, and we will have new figures very shortly on that. But Mr. Speaker, the prepaid card replaces the paper coupon system that has been utilized for years. This labor-intensive method has been very taxing on the Department of Social Services and its vendors, and a source of frustration to all. The distribution process has been very frustrating for clients who have had to endure long lines and long hours at the centers at the end of each month to collect their food coupon. It has also been frustrating for staff who are overwhelmed by the volume of clients descending on the centers, in spite of their best efforts to put certain procedures in place for collection of coupons to run smoothly. Vendors were also frustrated because of the accounting process for the coupons, as well as the extensive length of time for payment. Mr. Speaker, the introduction of this new payment method, which has many advantages, has eradicated these frustrations and improved the delivery of service. The first and immediate advantage of the prepaid card is that persons no longer have to come to the center at the end of each month to collect their benefit. Secondly, while the paper coupon specifies the food store where it has to be redeemed, the card allows the beneficiaries to shop around, as it can be used in any food store that accepts prepaid cards. Thirdly, the full value does not have to be utilized at one time. It allows for purchases to be spread out over the month. Then there is privacy with the card, so that beneficiaries are not readily identified and stigmatized and their dignity preserved. Mr. Speaker, the beneficiaries welcome this new method, which makes their lives as well as the lives of the staff of the centers much easier. We have put in place certain restrictions with the utilization of the card. The purpose of the card is to ensure that persons have access to food. Hence, the card can only be used at food stores and wholesale food establishments. Regular reports are received on the usage of the cards, and there have been some instances of persons attempting to utilize the card at unauthorized establishments, and these persons were counseled by their caseworker. Mr. Speaker, special arrangements have been made for beneficiaries who are bedridden or immobile, so that they too are able to benefit from the new method. Mr. Speaker, the Bank of the Bahamas is partnering with the government on this initiative and provides the card. Representatives from the bank provide training for beneficiaries and give the specific details as to how the card should be utilized. I must commend the bank for the excellent response and working relationship that has been established for this initiative. Mr. Speaker, a verification and reassessment exercise was conducted on every food assistance beneficiary to determine need and eligibility for the prepaid card. This was not an easy task, and it placed additional demands on the staff of the centers. I must commend the social workers and other staff of the department, including the accounts department, who did a remarkable job in this entire exercise and worked after hours, on weekends, and even holidays where necessary to complete the task. Mr. Speaker, some persons who were receiving paper coupons were deemed ineligible for continuation on the program. In the majority of instances, such persons were given a specified grace period before the paper coupon was discontinued. We have, however, established an appeals process for the benefit of persons who feel that the decision to terminate the assistance was incorrect. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to report that the introduction of the prepaid card for food assistance beneficiaries in New Providence is completed and Grand Bahama is partially completed. A deliberate decision was taken to complete the exercise for clients of the 8 Mile Rock office, hence the large number of beneficiaries from this area. As the exercise in 8 Mile Rock is virtually completed, efforts will now be focused on completing the exercise for beneficiaries of the Freeport office, and I am advised that this is completed and the balance of the beneficiaries in Grand Bahama, in Freeport, will be on by the end of September. Mr. Speaker, we recognize that any new initiative comes with challenges, and the road to this point was not an easy one, but with the addition of each center, we are able to improve the processes and deal with the issues that arose. Again, I must commend the director and staff of the Department of Social Services, the treasurer and staff of the Public Treasury, the staff of the Social Safety Net Project Unit and their partners, and the management and staff of the Bank of the Bahamas for the tremendous support for this initiative and the efforts to ensure its successful introduction. Mr. Speaker, the introduction of the prepaid Visa card is a precursor to the first phase of our Social Safety Net Reform Program, which we expect to pilot in the next, hopefully, 2 to 3 weeks in our Wolf Road office. This reform of the social safety net is intended to modernize the entire social assistance delivery machinery and will include the introduction of a conditional cash transfer program, which is used in many countries throughout the world, including some of our neighbors in the Caribbean. Our program has been named RISE, the acronym for Renewing, Improving, Sustaining, Empowering. The public relations campaign for the program, which includes billboards, advertisements, public service announcements, and the RISE jingle, have been promoting the program, the details of which I shall provide at a later date. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, just before I take my seat, I want to indicate that we have also been able to modernize the delivery of the uniform assistance to many persons in need of that particular assistance. We are again, instead of the purchase order, we have been utilizing a prepaid card, and so which has a very definitive lifetime, and so persons have been able to utilize the cards. Of course, because of the overwhelming usage, there has been just a slight delay with regard to the provision of the cards, but we expect that by the end of the week everything should be sorted out, so everyone who has uniform requests, their requests will be met. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the communication be brought up. In order that the communication do lie on the table. Further statements and communication by ministers. Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Marathon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today marks the beginning of the 2015-2016 school year, and as customary in the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology, the summer months have been dedicated to making certain that any necessary repairs and upgrades are completed to ensure that our physical conditions of our schools are conducive for learning. There is no doubt in my mind that our educational system will help to create and will help to establish a modern Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, the scope of works are always quite varied. Some schools required only minor works, while others quite extensive, as in the case of E.P. Roberts Primary School. Mr. Speaker, this school required the most repairs, and truth be told, it looks like a brand new school. The nature of the work encompassed over the summer included electrical, plumbing, masonry, welding, carpentry, and painting. Mr. Speaker, we are giving our schools a modern look, and it is our aim to maintain safe and modern campuses to reflect a safe and modern Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, this is now my fourth school opening, and I have learned a great deal and resolved over the years to do my best to ensure that we address most of the necessary repairs and that a system is put in place to ensure that scope of works are thorough and that all parties are held accountable. Mr. Speaker, over the past 4 school openings, I have committed to personally visit and inspect as many schools as is physically possible during the summer to ensure that the work was being done to standard. Mr. Speaker, we have forged a great working relationship with the Ministry of Education with the team at the Ministry of Work to facilitate the mobilization of projects in order that they would be completed in a time frame for the opening of school and in no way impede the opening of schools on their scheduled dates. Mr. Speaker, as is usually the case, there is always a possibility that there are unforeseen scopes of works which do not appear on the surface. There are more often than not instances where once the work begins, it is realized that there is more that is needed to be done, Mr. Speaker. We all know, however, that the vast majority of schools in the country are old structures. Some are half a century old, Mr. Speaker. The trailers at A.F. Adley School in particular, Mr. Speaker, have been condemned, and consequently 7th grade students are accommodated at the Hotel Union classrooms at Workers' House. And later this year, we expect to construct a new classroom block, a new 24-room classroom block on that campus. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, the Rumkey All-Age School is undergoing extensive renovations. This is a very old school, again, as well, Mr. Speaker. The 9 students that are at that school are being housed at a local church during the next 3 months of this term while that renovation and construction is completed. Mr. Speaker, I think it's appropriate at this point for me to interject that I stated that the repairs to the Rumkey School are in the region of $500,000. And I know there was some concern in the general public about spending this amount of money on this number of students, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to point out that this is the country that we live in. Our students are spread throughout the length and breadth of the Commonwealth. In a lot of these communities, Mr. Speaker, the school acts not just as a school, it acts as a community center, it acts as a hurricane shelter, and as such, we have to build it in order to service the community. We have great Bahamians in this country who grew up in small settlements, Mr. Speaker. This particular settlement of Rumkey is the home of Sir Milo Butler, our first Governor General, Mr. Speaker. And as such, if my recollection is right, he probably was schooled at this school as well, Mr. Speaker, or a small school on the island. And so, just because it is a small community, Mr. Speaker, it does not mean that as a country and as a people we cannot ensure that there's equity throughout the country, and that no matter what part of this country you live in, you're entitled to a good facility, a quality facility that is safe and is conducive to learning, but also that the community can use, Mr. Speaker. So I just want the general public, Mr. Speaker, to understand that this is the reality of governing an archipelagic nation such as ours. It is very, very expensive, Mr. Speaker. I have many schools that have less than 20 students. I have a school that has 2 students. I have to send a teacher there, Mr. Speaker, because those 2 students have the same right as any other Bahamian in this country to quality education, Mr. Speaker. And so I want people in our country to understand, accept that, and understand the challenge that we have. But we are pushing for equity, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to take this opportunity also to thank all of those who are involved in the extensive exercise that we go through each summer. From the teachers bringing to the attention of the principals the repairs that are needed, the principals functioning as project managers to ensure that all the works are completed. And Mr. Speaker, since I have become minister, I have mandated that all principals have the scope of works that will be carried out in their school, and they sign off on those works that are completed to standard before the contractor is paid. If the work is not done to standard, they will not sign off on it, Mr. Speaker. And we know that there are small percentage, unfortunately, of contractors whose work are not up to par, and the principals are not signing off on those, and they have to be redone, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank Mr. Coleman Andrews within the Ministry of Education and our physical plan team, who works tirelessly all summer long and all during the year to ensure that our facilities are maintained. Mr. Livingston Forbes and the staff at the Ministry of Works, and the contractors, Mr. Speaker, and even members of Parliament, Mr. Speaker. This is truly a unified effort from a unified team, and each member of the team fulfilling their role. Mr. Speaker, overall, there were approximately 300 contracts awarded throughout the Bahamas for the summer repair program. I wish also to note that pavilions will be constructed at 4 of our primary schools here in New Providence to ensure that students have a place to gather and eat during recess and lunch breaks. These pavilions, Mr. Speaker, were separate contracts and not included as part of our overall summer repair program, as they had to go to the tenders board because they were in excess of $50,000. We expect, Mr. Speaker, that they will be completed before the end of the school year, and we have made provisions for the school to go on and to work around the school period for the contractors to come in the evening and on the weekends to finish these much-needed pavilions at these schools, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the expenditure for the 2015 public school summer repair program amounted to some $7.673 million to date, Mr. Speaker. I am pleased with the progress of the summer repairs in our public schools, Mr. Speaker, throughout the Bahamas. And I've had an opportunity to assess the works done at schools in New Providence, Grand Bahama, and Abaco. And had the storm not come our way, Mr. Speaker, last week I would have been in Exuma. I wish to thank my parliamentary colleagues who accompanied me to the school tours in Grand Bahama, the Honorable Dr. Michael Darville, the Minister for Grand Bahama, the Honorable Renato Curry, Member of Parliament for North Abaco, as well as the Honorable Edison Key, the Member of Parliament for Central and South Abaco. Mr. Speaker, these gentlemen took a keen interest in the repairs being done to schools within their constituencies, and Dr. Darville was very hands-on with all of the schools in Grand Bahama. Mr. Speaker, I look forward to a great school year, and we hope that the school environments that we provide for our children will instill a love of learning and help to foster lifelong learners. Mr. Speaker, You see, we are all fueled and ready to push forward full throttle this school year. We have been motivated and inspired by all of the great things that have occurred in our educational system over the past year in particular. We are still riding the wave of exuberance and encouragement from the 19th Conference of Commonwealth Ministers held in the Bahamas this past June. Mr. Speaker, it is customary in the Department of Education that the theme carries a period. The theme for the educational year is carried for 2 years, and we are still being guided by the 19th CCEM theme, which is quality education for equitable development, performance, path, and productivity. Mr. Speaker, the ministry's emphasis will be on quality. In order for education to be the catalyst and stimulus to increase the standard of living of our people, Mr. Speaker. We are therefore committed to enacting and attracting and developing and maintaining quality teachers who will create quality environments where quality instruction takes place to produce quality students. Ideally, we are embarking on holistically building a modern Bahamas with best educational practices that are tried and proven. Mr. Speaker, it cannot and will not be business as usual in our educational system. We must hold all stakeholders accountable, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my colleague, the Honorable Dr. Bernard Nottage, recently made mention, and this morning as well, of enacting legislation to hold parents accountable for their children, Mr. Speaker. I support that wholeheartedly, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, parents need to be held accountable to take greater interest in the academic and social well-being of their children. Mr. Speaker, while we may not see the positive results overnight, we must have a sustained effort, and all citizens must get on board if we are to increase our academic performance. I've said it before, and I will say it again. Education cannot be used as a political pawn. And I thank those on the other side, Mr. Speaker, for exercising the maturity that is needed for us to move our educational system along and working hand in hand with me as minister and the government to move our educational system forward. We must realize that the future of our country hangs in the balance, and education is the scale upon which it stands, Mr. Speaker. There is no question, Mr. Speaker, that education is the means by which we will create a future that is prosperous, safe, and modern, as envisaged by our forefathers who fought ever so diligently for the freedoms we enjoy today. Mr. Speaker, I wish to encourage all Bahamians to tune into ZNS on Sunday evening after the news, when I will deliver the National Back to School Address, outlining very pertinent information and officially welcoming the students back to school, as I encourage them not just to meet, but to exceed whatever goals they have set for themselves. Mr. Speaker, I can say without fair contradiction that I feel our educational system is headed in the right direction. We have seen increases and improvement in our national results over the last 2 years. Steady improvement, Mr. Speaker, and that's what we aim for again this year, steady improvement. We are building capacity, and we are making the hard and necessary decisions and changes that will serve the best interests of our children. Mr. Speaker, before I take my seat, I wish to thank all those who have taken a keen interest in our educational system and in building a stronger country. I encourage all of us to be role models for our students so that they can have someone who they are proud to emulate. I implore all of us to work together to build and advance our country and to build a solid foundation for a stronger Bahamas. Again, Mr. Speaker, I wish to remind you that we continue to embrace technology in the Ministry of Education and remain on the cutting edge. We are seeing the benefits of social media, as during the storm we were able to post updates on various social media platforms, and it was well received by the public and helped us to get our information out very quickly. I encourage all of those who have not yet joined our movement to become actively engaged and keep abreast of all the exciting things happening in the Ministry of Education by joining us on social media, Mr. Speaker. The Ministry of Education is in keeping with a modern Bahamas by embracing modern practices. On Facebook, you can search and join the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology. On Instagram, search the Ministry of Education Bahamas. And on Twitter, search Bahamas MOEST, which stands for the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology. So you can like, post, tweet, and follow the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology 24/7, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the communication be brought up. In order that the communication do lie on the table. Further statements and communication by ministers. Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Carmichael.
Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in recent months, the Bahamas and its Bahamian athletes have been extremely successful in sporting disciplines all around the world. We also wish to commend them for the performances in the Bahamas and abroad. During the month of May this year, the May 2nd through 3rd, we witnessed the staging of the second edition of another highly successful IAAF World Relays. Not only did many international athletes express their enormous satisfaction with the entire event, but we here were also again able to boast of having an additional 2 new world records being set right here in the Bahamas, which is now known as the fastest track on the planet. Mr. Speaker, we wish to advise that an official delegation, including myself, the Director of Sports, Mr. Timothy Munnings, and Consultant of Sports, Mr. Grafton Eiffel Jr., traveled to Beijing within the last several weeks to attend the IAAF World Championships. In support of Team Bahamas, we saw 2 enormous events take place. It was the 50th Congress of the IAAF, and Monsieur Lamine Diack, who has now retired from office officially, was seen as a successor, Lord Sebastian Coe, who is now the new president of the IAAF, and I would say a great friend to the Bahamas. We also saw, sir, on this occasion of the 50th Congress, that the only woman of color elected to the world governing body thus far, and I think we have another one as a result of last week, was re-elected for the 3rd consecutive time. The only Caribbean also on that world governing body. We wish to congratulate Golden Girl Pauline Davis Thompson, who has been re-elected to her 3rd term on that extremely prestigious World Governing Council of Athletics. Pauline would have been, as I said, the first woman of color to be elected to the governing body of track and field. We also saw the addition of Mr. Dennis Marshall, who was elected for the first time to the Women's Committee of the IAAF. We wish to extend congratulations to Pauline Davis Thompson and Mr. Dennis Marshall on their recent appointments. We also saw, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Keith Parker, who received a Lifetime Achievement Award, one of the highest honors that can be bestowed by the IAAF. Mr. Parker received an award for his participation in athletics and his coaching in athletics and administration. It is of special mention, sir, that the morning after Mr. Parker received his Lifetime Achievement Award, he was at the track at around 6 a.m. and is still coaching high jumpers. Still coaching high jumpers at his age. We congratulate him for his very, very long and stellar career. The 25-member team, including 17 men, 8 women, carried the banner for the Bahamas during the 9 days of fierce competition. And I'm pleased to report that Team Bahamas won 2 fantastic medals as we saw the emergence of the next generation of great athletes from the Bahamas. Mr. Jeffrey Gibson winning a bronze medal in the men's 400-meter hurdles. It is a special note, that's right, a Grand Bahama boy. Is a special note that Mr. Gibson also is this year's Commonwealth Games champion at that same event. We also saw, sir, the emergence of someone we saw 2 years ago in Nassau at the Carifta Games who won the prestigious Austin Seeley Award, and we saw what we think will be the next great runner in the world as Shawnee Miller emerged for the first time on the world stage, easily capturing the silver medal in the women's 400 meters. Our men's 4x4 team finished second in their preliminary rounds, which would have secured a lane in the finals. However, the team was disqualified as a result of a lane violation. I wish to congratulate Mr. Gibson and Ms. Miller for their stellar performances, which placed the Bahamas in 22nd place overall among almost 200 countries. On the medal table, out of 214 countries, sorry, sir. We also saw at this event a man we really deserve to call Superman. Levan Sands returned to major competition at the world level after his injury in 2012 Olympic Games. Amen. And Pinewood Gardens. Not only did he return to major competition, sir, he also made it to the finals of the men's triple jump. Mr. Donald Thompson also advanced to the finals of the men's high jump and almost captured what he would have called his former glory. Congratulations are extended to Levan Sands and Donald Thompson, Donald Thomas, the executives of the Bahamas Athletic Association, the B3As, individual team members and management of their representation. Clearly, sir, the Bahamas continues to make its presence felt in the international sporting arena. During my visit to Beijing, sir, I also had the opportunity to pay a courtesy call on Ms. Julie Campbell, Chargé d'Affaires of the Bahamian Embassy there, and wish to offer my thanks to Ms. Campbell and her team for their level of professionalism and support during our visit. She hosted the entire team to a wonderful lunch, and also we got to see some of the 80 students who are living and studying in that region. I'm advised that a part of a small group of athletes who will now travel to Europe for the Diamond League competitions. However, the rest of Team Bahamas is expected in Nassau today. My ministry is in the process of planning a celebration for these athletes, and many of the athletes who performed stellar performances this summer, sir, in baseball, soccer, swimming, tennis, and Special Olympics. Mr. Speaker, we also wish to highlight the performance of the summer, which at any standard, when at the Pan Am Games, Ariana Vanderpool Wallace, who represented our country well, won the gold medal in the women's 50 fly. Today, Mr. Speaker, the 2nd of September, actually marks 15 years since the Golden Girls won their 4x100 Olympic gold medal in Sydney, Australia. And we want to take this moment to congratulate Debbie, Pauline, Eldis, Chandra, and Sabathita. It was today, maybe 2-3 hours ago, when they would have won their stellar gold medal in 15 years ago, sorry, in Sydney, Australia. Indeed, we remain extremely proud of the significant accomplishments of these athletes who continue to carry the banner for this small island chain. Mr. Speaker, we expect the Golden Girls to be in Nassau later this week, where we'll have a special ceremony commemorating their 15th anniversary. We begin plans for Ready for Rio, and we just want the Bahamian public to know we appreciate your support, and the best is yet to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the communication be brought up. Thank you. Order that the communication do lie on the table. Further statements and communication by ministers. Thank you. Communication by the clerk. Messages from, yes, communication by the clerk.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to report delivery to the Honorable Senate of messages 46, 47, 48, 49, 50.
Thank you. Messages from the Governor General, messages from the Senate. We have 3 messages from the Senate to be tabled. Motion for leave of absence, leave to resign seats or new writs, presentation of petitions, presentation of reports of committees, adoption of reports of committees, first reading of bills. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Central and South Eleuthera. First reading of bills.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time the following. A bill for an act to amend the Anti-Terrorism Act to facilitate the implementation of the United Nations Security Council resolutions under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, in which Article 25 of the Charter imposes obligations on the Bahamas as a member state and for connected purposes.
Thank you, honorable member. Do we have a second?
Second.
Order that the bill be brought up. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be introduced and read a first time. A bill for an act to amend the Anti-Terrorism Act to facilitate the implementation of the United Nations Security Council's resolution under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, in which Article 25 of the Charter imposes obligations on the Bahamas as a member state and for connected purposes. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Order that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to amend the Anti-Terrorism Act to facilitate the implementation of the United Nations Security Council resolutions under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, and which Article 25 of the Charter imposes obligations on the Bahamas as a member state and for connected purposes.
Thank you. Further first reading of bills. There are none. Second reading and committal of bills. Before I recognize the honorable member for South and Central Eleuthera, just to know that there are 7 bills that represent a compendium of what appears to be highly specialized bills. I just want to indicate to all members that the rule of relevance will apply to this debate. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Central South Eleuthera. Second reading of bills. Members, is it your intention to debate all bills?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
And one bill would be used as the lead bill?
Yes,
Very well.
Mr. Speaker, and we could use the Trademarks Bill 2015 as the lead.
Very well.
Mr. Speaker, I rise yet again on behalf of the good people of Central and South Eleuthera. It is always a pleasure to speak on their behalf, and with it comes the obligation of ensuring that their interests are never forgotten.
This morning, Mr. Speaker, it is my pleasure to introduce for debate and to move the passage of the Trademarks Bill 2015 and also the Patents Bill 2015, the Copyright Amendment Bill 2015, the Protection of New Plant Varieties Bill 2015, the Geographical Indications Bill 2015, the Integrated Circuits Bill 2015, and the False Trade Descriptions Bill of 2015. That's a mouthful, Mr. Speaker, as you had earlier indicated. Mr. Speaker, as indicated, this is a great pleasure for me. These are very important pieces of legislation. Indeed, the legislation marks a huge amount of work that has been performed over a number of years, beginning prior to the work of this administration by the Law Reform Commission. This legislation, Mr. Speaker, is required as a consequence of our signature of the Economic Partnership Agreement with the European Union and CARIFORUM, and will be required as part of our international obligations on becoming a member of the World Trade Organization. You may recall, Mr. Speaker, in 2001, the then government of the Bahamas applied to become a member of the World Trade Organization, to which I will refer as WTO hereinafter. And it is the intention of this administration, Mr. Speaker, to complete accession as soon as it is practical to do so. Mr. Speaker, in order to become a member of the WTO, the Bahamas must comply with, among other things, provisions of the WTO trade-related aspects of Intellectual Property Rights Agreement, which is also known in intellectual property circles as TRIPS. And that is the term that I will use going forward. And TRIPS prescribes rules for all major forms of intellectual property, including copyrights, trademarks, patents, and industrial designs. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, you may recall that in October 2008, the Bahamas signed the Economic Partnership Agreement together with other CARIFORUM states. Chapter 2 of that agreement addresses innovation and intellectual property matters and also requires compliance with several international agreements. More particularly, Mr. Speaker, Article 139.1 of the Economic Partnership Agreement requires that the Bahamas ensures adequate and effective implementation of the TRIPS agreement. Further, Mr. Speaker, Article 139.4 requires that TRIPS and EPA-compliant measures be enforced by the 1st of January 2014. In 2009, the government of the Bahamas engaged the services of a Canadian legal consultant and other legal consultants to review the Bahamas' intellectual property law in order to determine its compliance with the obligations of TRIPS and the EPA. Accordingly, a review of the Copyright Act, the Industrial Property Act, and the Trademarks Act was undertaken, and this review indicated the need for the Bahamas to achieve compliance with new mandatory obligations under TRIPS and the EPA. Mr. Speaker, the EPA, among other things, imposed a series of obligations of various types on all signatories to the agreement, including the Bahamas. It provides that all EPA parties must ensure adequate and effective implementation of the WTO TRIPS agreement and provides for further obligations in relation to copyright and related rights, trademarks, geographical indications, industrial design, patents, utility models, plant varieties, genetic resources, traditional knowledge, and folklore. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, the EPA requires the Bahamas to adopt certain intellectual property enforcement rights measures and to cooperate with the transition and implementation provisions of the EPA. In that regard, Mr. Speaker, the EPA requires mandatory compliance with the following international treaties, some of which are already required by TRIPS. 1. The Paris Convention for the Protection of Industrial Property, the Berne Convention for the Protection of Literary and Artistic Works, the Washington Treaty on Intellectual Property in respect of integrated circuits, the WIPO Copyright Treaty, the WIPO Performances and Phonograms Treaty, the Patent Cooperation Treaty, and the Budapest Treaty on the international recognition of the deposit of microorganisms for the purposes of patent procedure. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas is already party to the Paris Convention for the Protection of Industrial Property and the Berne Convention for the Protection of Literary and Artistic Works, which aim to protect the literary and artistic works of authors through copyright. However, the Bahamas, at the time of its accession to the Berne Convention, declared that it would not apply Articles 1 to 21.2 of that convention, and that further it did not consider itself bound by the provisions of Article 30. It should be noted, however, that under the TRIPS obligations, the Bahamas is required to apply the Berne Convention in its entirety, and that therefore steps are needed to be taken by the government to lift existing reservations. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas is not at present a signatory to any of the other listed treaties which are required by the EPA, and therefore steps in this regard to ensure compliance with our international obligations by acceding to the other treaties prescribed by the TRIPS agreement and the EPA have already been undertaken. The proposed legislation, which seeks to comply with the requirements of the WTO TRIPS agreement, the EPA, and other relevant intellectual property treaties administered by WIPO, was prepared by the Law Reform Commission in conjunction with the Ministry of Financial Services and an international trade consultant. It was also reviewed, Mr. Speaker, by other Canadian consultants to ensure full compliance, and it was amended accordingly. If you would permit me, Mr. Speaker, I would like to highlight some of the more important aspects of each of the bills being debated. And first, let's look at the Copyrights Amendments Bill 2015. Mr. Speaker, as you are aware, copyright law is a very important piece of legislation as it seeks to protect the ideas and expressions of artists, writers, musicians, etc. And as I was reviewing this, Mr. Speaker, I was reminded of my jurisprudence classes at Cave Hill, and in particular of the renowned German philosopher Hegel, who is reputed to have said, "I think, therefore I am." And it is really in that context, Mr. Speaker, that most legal persons look at copyright and other intellectual property protections as a protection of the human being, our very existence, our very creativity. And it is in that vein, Mr. Speaker, that this legislation is as critical and important as it is boring. And I think, I think most people would regard this as fairly dry stuff. The kind of stuff that you take if you suffer from insomnia and you wish to have a good nap. And so, Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to threaten members with an overtly technical exposition of it, but to merely highlight some of the major features of it, and during the course of debate, for those who are most keen about the legal niceties of intellectual property, we might have further discussion. But otherwise, I've taken the liberty of lightening the load a bit in this regard. Mr. Speaker, the Copyright Act was enacted in 1998 to make better provision in respect of copyright, to confer rights on performers and others in live performances, and to repeal the Copyright Act of 1956 of the United Kingdom insofar as it applied to the Bahamas. The Copyright Amendment Bill 2012, in short, Mr. Speaker, seeks to make a number of amendments to the Principal Act to modernize the law regarding copyright and to ensure that the rights of Bahamians are adequately protected and the provisions contained therein are consistent and in compliance with the Bahamas' existing or anticipated future obligations under various international agreements, including those of the World Trade Organization. Mr. Speaker, the Copyright Amendment Bill 2012 seeks to further modernize the law of copyright in the Bahamas, to upgrade protections for copyright holders in line with WTO and EPA obligations. In particular, Section 6 of the bill expands the categories of authorship to include for the first time architectural works. And I think that this is something which the architects in particular have been complaining about in relation to the existing law, and this marks a major step, particularly in an area of artistic work that is largely ignored as art by local people, but which is accepted globally as a form of artistic expression. Protection of computer programs and movies are also made explicit in the bill. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, the period of copyright protection has been reduced from 70 years to 50 years in order to conform to the requirements of the Berne Convention. Section 19 of the bill introduces new provisions to deal with devices and services designed to circumvent copyright protection. Section 20 of the bill clarifies that inadvertent infringement of copyright by innocent persons does not lead to liability for damages under the Act. Section 24 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, provides for the upgraded border protection in conjunction with the provisions of the new Customs Management Act, which contain specific provisions to interdict infringing goods at the border. Section 27 of the bill clarifies what constitutes an infringing use of copyrighted material for educational purposes. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, Section 32 clarifies that readings or recitations in public of published copyrighted material do not constitute infringement of copyright. And Section 33 clarifies that copyright in relation to reception or retransmission of copyrighted broadcast material by cable exists only in relation to companies headquartered or using transmitting facilities in a country that is a signatory to the Rome Convention. We turn then, Mr. Speaker, to the Patents Bill, 2015. And this bill, Mr. Speaker, makes provision for future patents and applications for future patents, and for the protection of inventions, and to give effect to certain international conventions on patents. Part 2 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, establishes the Office of Intellectual Property, putting the registrar in charge of the office that will perform the functions given under the Act and under any other law relating to intellectual property. Part 2 of the bill also provides for the registrar's responsibility for the grant and administration of patents. Certain restrictions pertain to officers and other employees, with secrecy being maintained both during and after employment, with violation of such secrecy obligations being deemed a criminal offense. Natural justice is to be afforded to anyone being adversely affected by the exercise of the registrar's discretionary power. Part 3 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, sets out the criteria for patentable inventions with specific reference to the term state of the art. It describes what an inventive step is and when it is capable of industrial application, while also stating the criteria for exclusions from patentability. Mr. Speaker, Part 4 of the bill provides for a person's right to apply for a patent. This part also provides for the circumstances under which an invention which is made by an employee or pursuant to a commission belongs to the employer. Unlawfully derived essential elements of the invention are subject to judicial assignment, and mention must be made of the inventor except he wishes otherwise. Part 5 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, provides for the making and filing of an application, its content, rules, requirements, specification, and purpose. It distinguishes the priority and earliest date of filing and the registrar's duty pertaining to the same, together with the remedies available to the applicant. It also specifies the requisite information required by the registrar of foreign applicants. Part 6 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, provides for the terms, annual fees, surrender, and claim of a patent after grant. For instance, annual fees have to be paid to the registrar to maintain the patent, and surrender made in a prescribed manner to the registrar for publication. Part 7 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, deals with property and patent applications and patents. Part 8 of the bill provides for the register of patents, the effect of registration on rights of patents, information about and inspection of patent applications and patents, correction of errors, rectification of the register, and evidence of register and documents. Part 9 of the bill provides for the exclusive rights of the owner of the patents and goes on to describe the nature and extent of those acts via the limitation of the effect of the patent. For instance, the owner's rights are subject to sections 48, 53, and 65 of the bill or the act when it is enacted. Part 11 of the bill sets out the terms, conditions, and defines what a voluntary license is. It provides that the license contract must be in writing, recorded and registered, otherwise it will not have any effect against third parties. It provides for the minister to make use of patented invention for the services of the state under certain circumstances, which decision will be subject to judicial review. And it also provides for the exercise of powers of the court on applications under Section 53. And, Mr. Speaker, this particular provision is of some interest, particularly in the medical field in the invention of drugs and the whole science and research in areas that may well become exceptionally important to the state in the event that we have an outbreak of a particular type of disease or a plethora of the incidence of a particular type of disease. Recently, I have kept company with a number of people who suffer from cancer. I've learned a lot about the suffering which these persons undergo and the difficulty that is posed to people who are part of our middle class or are, God forbid, even poorer, and who are suddenly faced later in life with the most terrifying of fatal diseases. Ironically, this happened to a friend of a doctor who inquired as to the price of a particular drug and found out that it was being sold per tablet at the sum of $123,000. Now, one could readily see that there are some instances where, for the sake of the protection of the community, if drugs reach that level of expense, that the minister might well, in those circumstances, be moved to exercise his power under the legislation, albeit subject to judicial review, for the purpose of saving lives. And this is something which was raised by the South African government internationally when discussing this issue of intellectual property. How far do we go in rewarding intellectuals when the reward to the intellectuals actually runs counter to our obligation to save lives? And that's an important question which persons in authority are likely to be faced with going forward. Mr. Speaker, Part 12 of the bill provides for how an infringement occurs, how to take action for infringement, the relief available, and the restrictions on such relief. It also provides for the court issuing a certificate on the outcome of the contested validity of a patent. It gives the court power to make declarations as to non-infringement and to remedy groundless threats of infringement proceedings, in addition to stating the effect of non-registration on infringement proceedings. Moreover, it states the conditions under which a person has the right to continue use begun before date of filing of priority. Part 13 of the bill provides for the grounds and examination of application to the court for revocation of patent. The court can require the proprietor of the patent to furnish whatever information is needed. Mr. Speaker, Part 14 of the bill sets out the circumstances in which the validity of the patent may be put in issue, and also the terms and conditions under which the court may allow the proprietor to amend the patent infringement or revocation proceedings. Mr. Speaker, Part 15 of the bill provides for patents and patent application which are applicable to utility certificates and the conditions under which conversion of patents into utility certificates can take place. In this part also, the terms and protection afforded by the utility certificate are provided for, and the grounds for revocation and registration by the registrar. Part 16 of the bill specifies the rules and regulations for the notification and implementation of international arrangements and patent cooperation treaty allowances for judicial notice of the same and instruments thereunder. Finally, Mr. Speaker, Part 17 of the bill provides for the list of offenses which may be committed by individuals and corporations and the time limits in respect of prosecutions under this particular part of the bill. Some of the offenses are falsification of the register, unauthorized claims, and the application of patent rights and the misuse of title, intellectual property office. The Trademarks Bill 2015, Mr. Speaker, is a distinctive sign, whether it be, sorry, Mr. Speaker, this bill is the flagship, but I've listed it in this particular part of my speech because I hadn't anticipated having to put it first. So it's on me. A trademark is a distinctive design, whether it be a word, symbol, logo, design, or image, used by an individual or business to distinguish its goods from the goods of others. By registering that trademark, the proprietor of the trademark has the exclusive right to use the mark for the designated services of the mark. Mr. Speaker, the Trademarks Bill will repeal the existing Trademarks Act and will modernize the law with respect to trademarks. It introduces rights not only in relation to trademarks, but also in relation to certification marks and collective marks. In addition, Mr. Speaker, it will allow for the first time protection for service marks applying to services in addition to the regular trademarks applying to goods and generally, and will provide more favorable provisions for the better protection and registration of trademarks in the Bahamas. There are detailed provisions in the bill, Mr. Speaker, for the procedure for registration of trademarks, and Section 12 provides for procedures for persons to oppose registration of trademarks, as well as related appeal procedures. Defensive registration of well-known trademarks is provided for as well. The duration of a trademark registration is for a period of 10 years and may be renewed thereafter as prescribed further in the Act. Section 21 of the bill provides that the provisions of the Parish Convention and other international treaties in relation to trademarks will apply under the proposed Act, and in the event of conflict between the Act and the treaty, the relevant provisions of the treaty will prevail. Section 24 of the bill allows the Minister to make rules to empower the registrar to award costs and to require parties to give security for costs in relation to appellate matters. Mr. Speaker, the bill provides in Section 64 through 66 for various offenses related to trademarks, including forging and false application of trademarks. Section 72 provides powers to the police to enter and search premises for goods and bearing false trademarks, as well as powers on the part of the police to seize, remove, or detain infringing goods found during such searches. The general penalty provision under Section 75 of the bill provides for fines not exceeding $50,000 or imprisonment for up to 5 years on summary conviction, as well as for forfeiture or destruction of goods bearing forged trademarks. Mr. Speaker, our populace would do well to listen to this debate and to read the relevant bills, because it means that when you go and purchase a knockoff item in China or elsewhere, if it bears a false trademark, you may well be liable if you are seen wearing the apparel with the offending trademark or carrying a watch on your hand that is a knockoff. In fact, in France, you are warned that if you have knockoff jewelry, to put it in your pocket and not be seen with it, because in some instances it may lead to immediate imprisonment. Geographical indications bill. Both. Mr. Speaker, a geographical indication is a name or a sign used on certain products which correspond to a specific geographical location or origin. For example, a town, region, or country. The use of a geographical indication may act as a certification that the product possesses certain qualities, is made according to traditional methods, or enjoys a certain reputation due to its geographical origin. The Geographical Indications Bill 2012 seeks to provide for the protection of geographical indications in order to meet the requirements of both the World Trade Organization and the EPA on trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights. Part 2 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, provides for the protection of geographical indications. Protection is given to a geographical indication whether or not it is registered. Protection will not be given to an indication that offends public order or morality, or which has ceased to be protected in the country of origin. Mr. Speaker, it is an offense in the designation or presentation of goods to indicate or suggest that the goods originate in a geographical area other than the true place of origin. To use a geographical indication identifying wines or spirits for wines or spirits not originating in the place indicated by the geographical indication, or to engage in conduct which constitutes an act of unfair competition, being an act of competition contrary to honest practices in industrial or commercial matters. The penalty for an offense is a fine of $10,000 or imprisonment for 2 years. Part 3 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, deals with the registration of geographical indications. Application for the registration of a geographical indication must be made to the Registrar General and may be made by persons carrying on an activity as producers of goods in a geographical area, consumers or marketing organizations incorporated or registered under the Companies Act. Mr. Speaker, Part 4 of the bill provides for the exceptions to provisions concerning trademarks. The registrar, on his own motion or at the request of an interested party, may refuse or invalidate the registration of a trademark that contains a geographical indication with respect to goods not originating in the territory indicated if use of the indication in the trademark for the goods is of a nature to mislead the public as to the true place of origin. Persons may continue use of a particular geographical indication of another country, identifying wines or spirits in connection with goods or services by citizens or permanent residents of the Bahamas who've used that geographical indication in a continuous manner with regard to the same goods or services in the Bahamas for a period of at least 15 years before the Act comes into force, or in good faith prior to that date. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, Part 5 of the bill deals with miscellaneous matters. The Integrated Circuits Bill, 2015, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as the Geographical Indications Bill, the Integrated Circuits Bill is a legislative response to the requirements of the TRIPS and the EPA. It provides specific protection to holders of rights in relation to the design and to the physical embodiment of the design of integrated circuits, sometimes known as microchips. Section 5 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, provides that the right to protection of a layout design lies in its creator and may be transferred by him while he is alive or may devolve on his death. Section 6 of that bill, Mr. Speaker, further provides that no person, without the express consent of the holder, shall reproduce, import, sell, or distribute a protected layout design. Consent, however, is not required where the layout design is reproduced for private purposes or for evaluation, analysis, research, or teaching. Section 7 provides that protection of a layout design will not extend in cases where a person imports, sells, or otherwise distributes for commercial purposes an integrated circuit and did not or had no reason to believe that the integrated circuit incorporated an unlawfully reproduced layout design. Section 8 states that protection of a layout design commences on the date of the first commercial exploitation if application for registration is made within 2 years of such exploitation, or on the filing date of the application for registration where there's been no commercial exploitation. Mr. Speaker, protection for integrated circuit designs will be for a period of 10 years. Persons who contravene Section 6 are guilty of an offense and are liable on summary conviction to a fine of $10,000 or to imprisonment for 2 years or to both. The court may, in addition to the fine and imprisonment, order the seizure and disposal of the layout designs, integrated circuits, or articles concerned, and any materials or implements used in the commission of the offense. I turn now, Mr. Speaker, to the last bill, I think. The protection of new plant, sorry, it's the penultimate bill. The New Plant Varieties Bill 2015. Mr. Speaker, the Protection of New Plant Varieties Bill, along with the Geographical Indications and Integrated Circuits Bill, implements the obligations of the Bahamas under the EPA and reflects future obligations under the World Trade Organization Treaty. It seeks to provide for the protection of new varieties of plants by giving the breeder exclusive control over the propagating material, including seeds, cuttings, divisions, tissue culture, etc., and harvested material, cut flowers, fruit, foliage, of a new variety for a number of years. As is the case under the other proposed bills, the administration of the provisions of the bill comes under the proposed Intellectual Property Office to be created pursuant to Section 3 of the Patents Bill. Under Section 5 of the bill, a right to be known as the breeder's right will be granted in respect to plant varieties of certain genera or species where the variety is new, distinct, homogeneous, stable, and given a variety denomination. Under Section 6 of the bill, a variety will be considered to be new if the propagating or harvested material of the variety has not been sold or disposed of to others, with the authorization of the plant breeder or his successor in title in the Bahamas for longer than 1 year before the date on which protection is applied for and outside the Bahamas, for longer than 6 years in the case of trees or vines, or longer than 4 years in the case of other plants before the filing date on which the protection is sought. Under Section 7 of the bill, a variety will be considered to be distinct if it is clearly distinguishable from any other variety whose existence is a matter of common knowledge at the time of filing the application for protection. Section 8 provides that a variety will be considered to be homogeneous if its plants show the same expression of the same characteristics. Under Section 13 of the bill, an application for the grant of a breeder's right may be filed by the owner of a variety who is a national or resident of the Bahamas, a contracting party, or any state which grants reciprocity treatment to the Bahamas. Under Section 18, the breeder's right will not extend to acts done privately and for non-commercial purposes. Acts done for experimental purposes and acts done for the purpose of breeding other varieties. Under Section 24, the registrar will invalidate a breeder's right at the request of an interested person where it is established that the variety is not new or distinct, or the holder of the right is not the owner of the variety. Section 25 provides that the registrar will declare the breeder's right forfeited where the holder of the right is no longer in a position to provide the registrar with requested materials or does not pay the renewal fee. Pursuant to Section 45, Mr. Speaker, infringements of the right of the holder of a breeder's right are actionable in the Supreme Court at the suit of the holder of the right. Under Section 46, Mr. Speaker, any person who willfully offers for sale or markets propagating material of a variety protected in the Bahamas is guilty of an offense punishable with a fine not exceeding $15,000. I did warn you that this was not the stuff that you would be riveted with. I turn lastly, Mr. Speaker, warned by the leader of the opposition that I am putting members to sleep, to the False Trade Descriptions Bill of 2015. Mr. Speaker, the False Trade Description Bill, which seeks to create an offense in relation to the use of false or misleading trade descriptions in relation to goods sold in the Bahamas and provides specific penalties in the event that the court determines that an offense has been committed. The bill seeks, Mr. Speaker, to define false trade descriptions and provides for exemptions from liability where innocent parties are affected. Mr. Speaker, I believe that I have only been 45 minutes. Sit down. And I did warn, Mr. Speaker, at the commencement of my speech that this was not the most riveting of subject matter, and that it was likely to
register the riveting scale.
It was likely to be a cure for any member's insomnia. And I will not prolong the agony. But Mr. Speaker, it is my solemn duty and privilege to move the passage of this compendium of legislation. I believe it to be exceptionally important to the intellectual community. We are on the cusp of launching the University of the Bahamas. We've seen the commencement of activities at BAMSI. We anticipate new activity in the area of marine science with the signing recently of the treaty and MOU in China. And it is anticipated that the activities that will be engendered by this administration's commitment to education and training will be adequately protected both locally and abroad by, one, the passage of this legislation, and two, our adherence to our international obligations, which thereby enable us to benefit from the reciprocal protection of other countries of the intellectual property that belongs to Bahamians. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Member. Do we have a seconder? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Seabreeze.
Can we have the podium, please? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make my contribution to this debate on behalf of the fine people of the Seabreeze constituency. Again, I stress how grateful I am to them for the confidence that they have reposed in me to be here and for their continual support over the last 3 years. I want to start by giving thanks to Almighty God for sparing this country from the ravages of Hurricane Erica. We are truly a blessed people. The people of Dominica have suffered immensely as a result of Erica, and it is fitting that we extend our condolences and sympathies to them. as they mourn the loss of their loved ones and rebuild their country. Mr. Speaker, I also wish to take this opportunity to wish the children and young people of the constituency of Seabreeze and indeed of the entire Commonwealth of the Bahamas every success as they enter a new school year. I want to encourage them to do their very best, to take advantage of the opportunity which they have been afforded, and to recognize the huge sacrifice their parents and those charged with their care make to ensure that they are prepared, properly uniformed, and equipped for school. In my constituency, our summer school program, in partnership with the Southeastern Division of the Royal Bahamas Police Force, was a smashing success. And last week, we delivered books and backpacks to many of our resident students. On Saturday coming, we will host a back-to-school party for the children, and residents of Seabreeze constituency are invited to bring their children along. Mr. Speaker, I pray God's richest blessings on students, parents, educators, and support staff for this coming fiscal year. I wish to congratulate and thank the member for Marathon for the improvements that he has made over the last 3 years to the educational system, to its programs, and to its plant. I also want to encourage him not to lose heart and to know that his efforts augur well for the future. Mr. Speaker, we have before us today a suite of bills which deal with intellectual property. We have the Copyright Amendment Bill, the Patents Bill, False Trade Descriptions Bill, the Protection of New Plant Varieties Bill, Geographical Indications Bill, Integrated Circuits Bill, and the Trademarks Bill. Intellectual property, Mr. Speaker, refers to creations of the mind, knowledge, creative ideas or expressions of the human mind that have a commercial value. We are discussing such things as creativity, inventions, literary and artistic works such as novels, poems, plays, films, music, artistic work, drawings, paintings, photographs, and sculptures, and architectural design, symbols, names, and images used in commerce. Intellectual property rights allow creators or owners of such products or ideas to benefit from their own work or their investment in such works. Intellectual property rights give such individuals the right to prevent others from using their ideas, inventions, designs, and other creations, and enables them to use that right to negotiate payment for their use. Simply put, intellectual property rights deals with protecting the rights of those who create original works. Mr. Speaker, one may ask why promote and protect intellectual property rights. The answer, the World Intellectual Property Organization, or WIPO, the international organization dedicated to helping ensure that the rights of creators and owners of intellectual property are protected worldwide, and that inventors and authors are therefore recognized and rewarded for their ingenuity, gives 3 compelling reasons. Firstly, the progress and well-being of humanity rests on its capacity to create and invent new works in the areas of technology and culture. Secondly, the legal protection of new creations encourages the commitment of additional resources for further innovation. And thirdly, the promotion and protection of intellectual property encourages economic growth, creates new jobs and industries, and enhances the quality and enjoyment of life. Mr. Speaker, in 2001, the Bahamas applied to become a member of the World Trade Organization, or the WTO as we know it. In order to become a member of the WTO, the Bahamas must comply with inter alia provisions of the WTO's trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights agreement, TRIPS, as we heard discussed by the member for South Eleuthera, which prescribes rules for all major forms of intellectual property, like copyrights, trademarks, patents, and industrial designs and their protection. The present suite of intellectual property bills, which we are now debating, seeks to modernize the Bahamas' intellectual property regime and provides the necessary safeguards and assurances to both Bahamian and foreign investors that their investments are protected. At the same time, passage of the suite of legislation will bring the Bahamas into compliance with our international obligations under the Economic Partnership Agreement, or EPA, which the Bahamas signed in 2008. And it will ensure that Bahamian laws are in compliance with international best practices, including the WTO's, the TRIPS agreement, and other international intellectual property agreements. Mr. Speaker, consultation on changes to the intellectual property regime of the Bahamas began as early as 2009. General public consultations on the present draft bills included visits to the Family Islands, a panel discussion at the British Colonial Hilton in January 2013, as well as formal consultation with members of the Bahamas Bar in February of 2013. Mr. Speaker, in fact, 2 members of the Bahamas Bar in private practice were invited and agreed to participate in a small public-private select committee to review the draft bills and provided constructive written feedback on the draft legislation. Additionally, after the broader consultations with the Bahamas Bar Association, additional comments were received from several other members of the bar in private practice. Mr. Speaker, the government believes that the implementation of a modern intellectual property regime with the passage of the present suite of bills should assist the Bahamas in promoting sectors of vital importance to the Bahamas' socio-economic and technological development. Investments in stem cell research, protection of the works of Bahamian artisans come to mind. There is great potential to create new employment opportunities in the areas such as law, the industrial sector in Grand Bahama, entertainment, and the creative industry, health, and research and development. Additionally, the government believes that passage of the new legislation should address concerns raised by local professional bodies such as architects, engineers, and photographers who have been calling for the protection of their works. Further, the new regime will create a suitable environment for more Bahamian entrepreneurs to register, protect, and enforce their own intellectual property. Mr. Speaker, intellectual property could be described as an abstract that many people really give no thought to as they go about their day-to-day activities. However, each of us has an intrinsic capacity to create by using our talents. Simply put, if properly exploited, our talents can cause us to amass great wealth and or notoriety. But usually, in order for this to be achieved, some protective mechanisms have to be in place, like this suite of legislation that we are debating today. Mr. Speaker, I believe, and I don't know that there are many of them who will actually contribute to this debate, but I believe that if they did, members of the opposition will probably say today that this is really not the time to be dealing with these bills. They'll say that we should probably be spending our time dealing with crime and unemployment or some other issue that is dominating the news. I understand why they would probably say that. They will say that because the accepted solution to crime is to pass more and more laws, creating more and more new offenses, increasing penalties,
Careful, member.
buying more firepower for the police and our national security forces.
Careful, member.
And I'm not knocking any of these things because they have contributed to the level of success that we have achieved thus far against the criminal element. However, it goes beyond these remedies, Mr. Speaker. I hear people say all the time that you need to enforce the laws against not so significant offenses. And I agree with that too. And as we develop as a society, we have to consider creating an infrastructure where laws are respected, yes, but where people are also respected. Respected for the fact that they are equal in God's sight. And Mr. Speaker, I say that even though women are not equal under our constitutional law, they are equal in God's sight. And that their talents and what they produce of value also belong to them and should be respected. Hardly anybody ever considers the violence done to persons when their intellectual property is stolen. I'm of the view that all of this helps to foster the slack, loose environment that is an incubator for more serious crimes and offenses. So you see, Mr. Speaker, these are perhaps not the burning issues of the day, that is, these bills, but they affect tremendously the persistent nature of those burning issues. I am considering the bigger picture today and trust that the members opposite and the members in the House as a totality will see the bigger picture. Mr. Speaker, in seriously considering the import of the bills and looking at the intent and purpose behind all of them, it becomes patently obvious that they will go far in assisting us in the development of a better structured, better regulated, and better ordered society. Over time, these abstract improvements will undoubtedly pervade the psyche of our people, help to change the mindset, and manifest positive, tangible results. The fact is, people have rights, rights that extend beyond just their physical beings and their physical space. These rights extend to their creativity, their talent, their unique style and way of doing things, and to what they produce from these intrinsic qualities. These qualities that define our very personalities are the most valuable assets to us. Unfortunately, they are often the least valued by others. They are often exploited for others to gain, rather than for the gain of the owners. Who can deny the value of Susan Wallace and her poetry, and the effect she had on us as children, having to learn and to recite her poetry for school lessons and for BJC exams? Who can deny the uniqueness and creativity of Tony McKay, the Obeah Man, and Blind Blake? The quality and creativity of their inimitable styles are interwoven into our minds, our hearts, and our culture. I am of the view that Bahamian songwriters are among the most talented creative people on the planet. No one can write a song that rhythmically tells the story of some current event, some happening, or some person of interest in such a way that it captures the pure essence of what they set out to convey. The likes of Gino D, D-Mac, Funky D, KB, Ronnie Butler, Eddie Minnis, Veronica Bishop, Maureen DeValle, the list goes on, have all been able to capture the very essence of Bahamianism, if that's a word, Mr. Speaker, in their lyrics and in their music. Then there are those who have gone on to their great reward, but have left an indelible mark on our cultural heritage. Blind Blake, Therese Hepburn, Count Bernardino. We thank them, Mr. Speaker, yet even now, for their invaluable contributions to their country. There are the many artists who use the canvas and paper to draw and paint. Eddie Minnis, Brent Malone, Chad Roberts. We have playwrights like James Catlin, Jeannie Thompson. The list goes on. These productions come about through blood, sweat, and tears. However, typically, our artists profit much less from their work relative to their counterparts internationally. Music is downloaded, copied, burned, sold on the sidewalks, walks, at the fish fry, by the food store, anywhere with no attribution and definitely no profits to the artists. Their propriety rights are trampled on each day without even a casual thought. This persists because of the lack of protection afforded to our artists under our existing laws. Concomitantly, there is little respect or protection afforded to the works of artists from other countries either. Their work, too, is exploited in similar fashion. These bills will help to provide protection for the creativity of work of local and international artists. It is anticipated that by this suite of legislation, our artists, who by their very nature are entrepreneurs, will be in a much better position to profit from the fruits of their labor, their talent, and their intellect. Mr. Speaker, I support this suite of bills with the knowledge and hope that it augurs well for improving the overall infrastructure of our society. They will assist us to regain some of the respect for others and for others' property that we seem to have lost somewhere along the way. It will make for a structured, well-ordered society, providing an environment in which Bahamians and investors and persons who possess intellectual genius can thrive and prosper. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Thank you, Honourable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed, which serves as the lead bill in the compendium of 7 bills regarding intellectual property. A bill for an act to make new and better provisions for the protection and registration of trademarks to give effect to certain international obligations of the Bahamas with respect to trademarks, to repeal the Trademarks Act, Chapter 322, and to provide for connective matters. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Montague. The member yields. The chair recognizes honorable member for Bain and Grandstown.
Speaker is to move the suspension of the House until 3 p.m. this afternoon.
Moved and seconded that the business of this House suspends until 3 p.m. this afternoon. I didn't.
Mr.
You
Speaker.
wanted to be recognized?
Yes.
Let me just finish the motion. It's moved and seconded that the business of this House suspends until 3 p.m. this afternoon. As many.
Thank you.
Chair recognized member for Long Island.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with the concurrence of the governing side, they've allowed me just 2 minutes to say a few things, as I won't be here. I want to apologize. I won't be here this afternoon. And so if I can just have this opportunity. Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to just make note, we've had several deaths in my constituency this past week, and since I won't be here, and I will be off the island as of next week, till next week as well, I just wanted to acknowledge them. Mrs. LaGloria Knowles, who died earlier this week. We also had Miss Gina Cartwright and Miss Bernice Minnis. Once again, Long Island is losing a lot of its citizens, and I just wanted to extend condolences to all of their family members, and that God would continue to console and comfort them. I also wanted to make note of the fact that we have Mr. Lawrence Major. Many people will know him from South Long Island. Apparently he suffered a heart attack earlier in the week and is hospitalized. And while I'm speaking about Long Island, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the Minister of Education for his overview. But when the Prime Minister earlier this year met with the students of Mangrove Bush Primary, we had one wheelchair-bound student, sir, in that crew who's now at NGM. Just wanted to note that the work for her accessibility still hasn't been done, and school will be commencing, I think, today, if we can get something done in that regard. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, I think it would be remiss if I were not to acknowledge the retirement of Mrs. Barbara Burrows, P.S., who was the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Social Development during my tenure, and also the tenure for the minister, the member for Yamacraw. She was a lady that obviously worked many years and excelled in the public sector. She started, believe it or not, under my grandfather's tenure, Sir Milo, when he was the Minister of Welfare, and she was certainly a person who helped to modernize social services as we know it today. She actually worked with both the current minister and myself on this same conditional cash transfer that is going on. And so I just want to acknowledge her outstanding work. And I want to say thank you very much to the governing side for allowing me this opportunity at this time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member. As many, chair recognized member for Marathon.
Speaker, I'd like to address the member with regard to the issue with MGM Major and the ramp. That matter was brought to my attention, Mr. Speaker, in early August. I approved the contract for that to be done for $14,000 for the contractor who was presently on site. They indicated they would make every effort to have it completed before school opened, and so I'm sorry to hear that it wasn't completed, but I can assure you that that has been approved, and it will be completed shortly if it's not already done.
Okay. Thank you, honorable member. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The business of this House suspends until 3 p.m. this afternoon.
All right.
Good afternoon. We're here at the House of Assembly where the morning session just wrapped up. And here with me I have the Member of Parliament for Central and South Eleuthera and Minister of State for Legal Affairs who led off the debate with a compendium of bills. Minister Gomez, good afternoon.
Hi, how are you?
Can you just enlighten us on what was discussed this morning in the House of Assembly?
Well, we introduced the second reading of the intellectual property legislation, which includes trademarks, copyright, patents, integrated circuits, geographical indications, and a couple other bills. This is important for us because we are hoping to accelerate our accession to the World Trade Organization, and one of the requirements is that we comply with a number of conventions or treaties, and these acts, when they're passed, will assure our conformity with the international rules with respect to intellectual property.
So as it relates to the World Trade Organization accession, just speak to how important it is for the Bahamas to gain that accession and what these bills will seek to do as it relates to that.
Well, the accession to the World Trade Organization enables us to participate in the global marketplace on an equal footing with the other members of the World Trade Organization. At present, in this region, we're the odd man out, and this may affect us, particularly in intellectual property issues, because artists have difficulties in getting reciprocal protection in other jurisdictions. So once these bills have been passed, we will be fully compliant with our international obligations and entitled to have our citizens have their interests protected in places that are also subscribers to those treaties.
So from your standpoint, how soon after these bills have been passed do you see the Bahamas gaining that accession?
Well, that's a matter for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as to the timing. But this has been holding it up, and now that this will be passed, we would be free to go.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to share, Minister Gomez?
Well, I'm going to be in my constituency distributing bags and school supplies, which were postponed due to the tropical storm Erica. So I'm hoping to have that completed by Monday, and I want my constituents to be aware that that is going on.
Thank you so much, Minister Gomez. There you have it from the Minister of State for Legal Affairs and the Member of Parliament for Central and South Eleuthera. The debate will continue back here at the House of Assembly at 3 o'clock. From the House of Assembly, I'm C.S. Scatterly.